Most of the talk has been focused about the Bears finding a new offensive coordinator, but they also have a vacant defensive coordinator job as well. I will say that having a defensive head coach like Matt Eberflus makes the offensive coordinator job much more important, mainly because no matter who the defensive coordinator is, they have to run Matt Eberflus's defense. An offensive coordinator gets to run his own offense to an extent and call plays. There's a chance that Eberflus lets a new defensive coordinator call plays, but it depends on who they land. That being said, I want to discuss some potential candidates for the DC job. Let's get right into it. First off, I think there's a decent chance that we promote from within the coaching staff to find a new DC. Now, some people seem to be against this idea, but we have a couple of really worthy candidates on the defensive side. Let's discuss those guys first. The most deserving guy to me would be defensive backs coach John Hoke. He has 42 years of coaching experience, including 18 seasons in the NFL. He also worked as the Bears defensive backs coach from 2009 until 2015. He worked under both Lovie Smith and Mark Trestman. He has never been a defensive coordinator, though. Next up is Phil Snow, another guy with a ton of experience. He started coaching in 1976 at just 21 years old. He also started out as a defensive backs coach, but he became defensive coordinator for Boise State, Arizona State, UCLA, Washington, Temple, and most recently Baylor from 2017 to 2019. Snow was also the defensive coordinator for the Panthers for 3 years from 2020 to 2022. He was brought in mid-season this year to be the Bears' senior defensive analyst, and he seemed to help the defense improve down the stretch, although that might have just been the Tez effect. And then the final in-house candidate, that's going to be linebackers coach Dave Borgonzi. He's been coaching in the NFL since 2011. Interestingly enough, he started out as an offensive assistant for the Dallas Cowboys before moving to the defensive side of the ball in 2014 with the Bucs. He's been a part of Eberflus's staff since they were in Indy together, where he was the linebackers coach from 2018 through 2021. And he's also spent the last 2 years with the Bears in the same role, and he coached at the Senior Bowl last year. You can also throw our safeties coach in there as well, Andrew Curtis. I think all of those in-house candidates could at least get interviews, but now let's talk about some guys not already on the staff. First up is Leslie Frazier. He's a former Bear, and he had a ton of success as the Buffalo Bills defensive coordinator. He was also a head coach in the NFL with the Minnesota Vikings for 3 seasons and went to the playoffs. He's been coaching since 1999. He served 11 years as a defensive coordinator with the Bucs, Bills, and Vikings, and he was also a part of Tony Dungy's staff in 2006 when the Colts won the Super Bowl. Leslie Frazier is a well-respected name. And then next up, I want to talk about another former Bear. You guys might remember hard-hitting safety Chris Harris. He transitioned to coaching in 2013 and had his first job with the Bears. He then coached with the Chargers, Commanders, and Titans. He's currently the Titans' defensive passing game coordinator and is looking to land his first job as a defensive coordinator. I've always liked Chris Harris. Next up is a big name, former Giants DC Wink Martindale. He's been in the NFL since 2004 and has been a defensive coordinator since 2018. He was the DC for the Ravens from 2018 through 2021, and he spent the last 2 seasons with Brian Daboll as the DC of the New York Giants. He left his position in New York and is now looking for another defensive coordinator job. This is a guy that Eberflus might consider letting call plays. He's a big name, and I think he could be interested in working with this talented defense, but he might prefer a team with an offensive coach so he can run his defense without restrictions. And then I also wanted to talk a little bit about Ben Bloom. He's the Cleveland Browns defensive line coach. We've seen firsthand just how good the Browns defensive line has been. Bloom has worked in the NFL since 2009. He's worked with defensive ends and linebackers and spent his entire career with the Cowboys and Browns. He's a hot candidate to land a DC job and another name to watch out for. And then there are a couple other names out there that I just want to mention. I mentioned Bears safety coach Andrew Curtis, But on top of that, I want to mention Cowboys defensive back coordinator Joe Witt Jr., as well as Anthony Weaver, who's the assistant head coach with the Ravens and a defensive line specialist, and then Panthers defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero. There are a lot more candidates out there, but to be honest, I've spent way more time researching offensive coordinator candidates and studying draft prospects than I have looking into defensive coordinator prospects. I did spend a lot of time researching today and digging around some of these names. My two favorites on the list are probably Chris Harris and Leslie Frazier, but honestly, I'm perfectly fine with Matt Eberflus coming back this year and calling plays on the defense. He seemed to do a really good job, so I'm not as worried about who ends up being our defensive coordinator, but if we do bring in a big name, I'm all for it. In case you haven't been paying attention to the offensive coordinators, we have interviewed 6 guys in total so far. Shane Waldron, Greg Olson, Greg Roman, Liam Cohen, Clint Kubiak, and Thomas Brown. All 6 of these guys have experience as offensive coordinators in the past, and all of these guys are experienced play callers. Everyone on the list except for Greg Roman comes from Sean McVay's Shanahan-style West Coast coaching tree. So the Bears have a clear type when it comes to offensive coordinators. So far, nobody has been announced as far as interviews for defensive coordinators. So the list I put together for defensive coordinators is mostly speculation, but there are some rumors involved there. It's hard to tell if a coach is going to be good or bad. It's more about what philosophies they run and whether or not they have experience calling plays. Matt Nagy and Luke Getsy were first-time play callers, and we see how that works out. So we want one of these guys that has called plays before. I think that's imperative to this offensive coordinator search. I am moving full force into off-season mode and digging in deep on a ton of prospects. I watched a ton of all 22 on quarterback prospects last night. I started with Caleb Williams and Drake May. I have a ton of stuff planned this offseason, including draft coverage, free agent coverage, and covering everything from the Combine to the Senior Bowl, trades, and more off-season news. Stay tuned, guys. Remember to hit that like button for me. And until next time, bear down.
Ryan, did Braxton Jones solidify himself at left tackle, or is that something where you're kind of not sure and could be like a high round pick as an upgrade? Where do you stand on him?
Yeah, I thought Braxton did a good job. Obviously, he got a little dinged up. That was the first time he's missed a game. He did a nice job. He continues to get better. I was proud of the progress. He spent a lot of time with Olin this offseason, just working on his anchor, and I thought you saw improvements there. I do believe he's a starting left tackle. But if it comes down to a situation where we increase competition, then that's what's best for us, then we'll do that. But I'm proud of Braxton.
Swifty in the house!